And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Keith West. He is a former Navy pilot. He's a CFII and entrepreneur like myself. Keith has owned and managed several small businesses. Before coming to AOPA as Senior Director of Flight School Business Support, he was the Director of Flight Training at Heart of Virginia Aviation, a mid-sized flight school in Richmond, Virginia. So Keith, I'm really happy you're able to join us. You know how passionate I am of the business of flight training. It's one of those core things that we really need to understand to excel at and work at to be better at our craft. So Keith, let's hear what what you have to say on the business of flight training.
All right, Rick. Well, first, let me say how happy I am to be here tonight. And let me give a big shout out to you all at NAFI. I gave this presentation at AirVenture this past summer, and it's just a great operation that you have been running for the last couple of years there. This last year, I was here with AOPA, and the year before that is just a spectator. And I went to your tent and participated in the programs that you have there, the professional development programs. And it's just a great thing to make available to flight instructors and the aviation community, and we really appreciate the effort that you're putting into Oshkosh as well as programs like this and just education in general. And you know, here at AOPA, there a lot of us are flight instructors and members of NAFI, so we're just big fans and supporters of what you're doing, and I'm happy to be here tonight. So a little bit about my background. You mentioned that I'm an entrepreneur and CFI and that sort of thing. And I have what I consider a pretty odd background. And it's when frankly, why I ended up here. Like a lot of people in aviation, a high school student, and you know, I soloed at 16, got my license at 17, and after that went into the Navy and flew for the Navy. And after that, I kind of took a hiatus from flying for a number of years. I flew with, eventually got into CAP and flew with them, and then probably about 4 years ago, I was talking with a flight instructor friend of mine, and I had never had an idea that I was going to be a flight instructor. It seemed like something that was too dangerous to do. But I took the leap. But the first question I asked, I said, is there a demand for flight instructors? And, you know, this is just like maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, and it hadn't really got to the crisis point it is now, where every flight school in the country is just dying to have flight instructors. Yeah, but so he said, yeah, you know, I think you can get a job. And so I went through the I got my certificate, and I called up the local flight school. I actually sent in a resume. They called me within an hour and said, you know, can you come in now? Yeah. Okay, so I came in, and I was out, you know, just out and about in shorts. I told him that. I said, you know, I'm not really presentable for an interview. And I was like, well, come on in anyway. We need to talk to you. And so I go in and get the job on the spot. And then about 2 weeks later, I've been at the school, and I was looking around. I was like, well, you know, nobody seems to really be in charge here. So I gave some suggestions to the owner about what he might do, and said, well, would you like to run the flight school? And you know, so that's how I ended up running a flight school. And it turned out to be I had a good background for that, having been in various businesses before, and you know, started my own business and that sort of thing. And so then about just over a year ago, I saw this listing on AOPA for a position, and it had all these odd requirements. They wanted somebody who had been in training and who had run their own business and who had managed a flight school, flight instructor, all these different things. And so I said, if that's not me, it's nobody. And so that's how I ended up here at AOPA, something that I never expected to happen. But it's a really exciting program we have. I'm a part of the You Can Fly initiative, and we have 4 different initiatives, and one of them is for flight school business support. And what we're doing is we're developing the programs and technologies to try to help flight schools be more successful. Because the real issue that we're trying to address is that there is, for the last number of years, ever since I got my license in 1982, the pilot population has been declining. And so it's our job, it's what our mission is to halt that decline. And one of the things that we identified as a problem is that 80% of the people who start flight training drop out somewhere along the way. And our job is to get those numbers up. And the way we intend to do it is to provide training for flight schools on topics. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight, as well as other topics as well, such as marketing, to help flight schools do better in their business. And so business, that's what we're talking about tonight, because a lot of people get into flight training, maybe flight instructor, a student who is enamored with the flight training process, and but it ends up being a business. And so you want to, if you're thinking about starting a flight school, or and so one of the things that you need to ask is, what are your personal goals? Now, the first one would be financial. And so you think, well, what can I make as a flight instructor? And so you just maybe do some numbers on the back of an envelope and think, well, I can get this much per hour. And if I work 8 hours a day and multiply that over the course of the year, I'm going to be rich. But you need to kind of pull back from that a little bit and think about what's realistic. And so you can think, I think a probably typical charge for a flight instruction across the country is like somewhere around $50 an hour. And so how many hours can you actually work a day in a week? Well, I'll tell you, you can't bill for 8 hours a day as a flight instructor. You would be probably lucky to do about 6 hours a day, and it would depend on where you are in the country as to what type of weather and to what type of conditions that you might have, to what you'll actually be able to realize as far as revenue. And so revenue, you can't dismiss that, because in the end, most people who are going to work probably want to, well, and that's the way you got to look at it too. Are you going to try to earn a living from it, or is it a hobby? There's some people who have retired from their jobs and they have maybe a good pension or good setup, and so they're not looking at it so much as a financial endeavor as. But even still, the time that you put into your business and to your efforts, if you don't, along the way. And so it's really important to go into this with real understanding of what type of revenue you require to support you and your family, or whatever type of lifestyle you want, and then look at it with training is going to be able to help you get to whatever financial goals that you have. Then beyond financial goals, there's the personal side of it. I sort of mentioned you have to devote to it. Or you're thinking that you're going to have maybe be sort of like an independent flight instructor, that you do something on the weekends, or is this a 7-day-a-week type of business? And that's something you got to think about too, because in the business by yourself, and you're going to be devoting enormous amounts of time to it, per hours per day and days of the week. I mean, I do suggest that everybody build in 5 or 6 day week, and work a reasonable number of hours a day, because if you burn yourself out, you're not going to be able to support your business. And so personal life, are you going to be able to devote this sort of time that will be required to getting a business started? Because one thing I guarantee you, participate. Okay, so next, considering those things, start a flight training business. And find out that, even say you're a flight instructor and you think it's great to be able to do flight instructing, you've been doing it part-time and now you want to do it full-time, and you think, well, if I start a business, I can be a flight instructor 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, and that's going to be great. Well, yes, you can do that, but you're also going to have the other parts of running a business. You're going to have finances. You're going to be taking in money. You're going to be spending money. You're going to have to account for it. You're going to have to be record keeping, making sure that all the bills get paid, and the taxes and other type of more time than what you anticipate up front. Once again, that's something I can guarantee you. Then also parts of a business is how you're going to market yourself. Now we're going to talk about a little bit more about marketing as later into the program, but still, it's not like you can necessarily open up your doors and you're automatically going to have customers. You're going to at least have to let people know that you're in business and that you're ready and what it is you provide. And the downside of every business that you will ever start is that you're going to have customers. Now you think, oh, well, you want customers, and absolutely you do, but you're going to have to manage the customers. You're going to have to interact with them. You're going to have to meet their people don't think about when they start a lot of sort of businesses, like maybe you're a flower arranging or something like that. You think, oh, I'm just going to be arranging flowers, or I'm going to be just flying airplanes. Well, expectations. So with that personal part out of the way, the next thing you need to decide, well, visioning it. First of all, you're going to have a location. Every flight school that I know of is generally because most airports in the country are owned by some segment of government. There is an airport authority that you're going to have to be able to deal with things that you probably didn't even know, the rules and regulations. And some airports might be happy to have you come and set up a flight training business, especially if there's not one there already. But other airports might have one or two flight schools already going, and there might be some sort of motivation to limit competition, and that there might be rules that you'd be forced to comply with that would make it difficult for you to start a flight school. And you don't want to find that out when you're way down into the planning process, if you've already spent money on airplanes and made promises to people. So you want to understand right up front about what the situation is at the airport that you plan to do business at, and are you going to be able to actually establish a business at that location. So there's, say that you've got a place. Is there anybody else there now? Or what kind of competition are you going to have? And a lot of people think, well, I want to be into any sort of business without competition. And that can be good, but on the other hand, if there's nobody there, it might indicate that there's not a market. There are people who are willing to pay for your flight training. And so having an open field is not necessarily the best thing that you might think of. And so don't be afraid or don't be put off if there have competition. It's just something doing the planning for your business. And so that's the local market. And the local market, it's different depending on where you are, because most flight training probably is local. And so a very different experience than if you live somewhere out in a rural type of area with not a lot of population to draw from. And the way that you go about setting up your business will be different based on that. And let's say that you are, though, in a remote location. It's not necessarily a bar to a flight training business. And I'm going to give my son turned 16 yesterday, as a matter of fact, and so what I gave him for his birthday was a flight time in a glider to be able to solo. And so the place that we went was somewhere kind of out in the middle of South Carolina with hardly anything around, but they have a thriving business there, bringing in people to do glider training. And so if you are out somewhere, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to be able to have a business. It just means that you might have to do it differently, maybe bring in people and it's not just locals that you're dealing with, that you can access a wider market. So what is it that you're going to provide? Some way or another, you're going to have to differentiate yourself, whether you have local competition and you're going to be one of 3 or 4 or 5 flight schools, or if you're going to try to bring in people like this glider training operation all over. What is it that sets you apart from everybody else. And every successful business is able to do. Now, one of the most important things you can do is decide who is your target. Answer that question. It's that that information is going to give you a shortcut to answer a lot of other questions that you will have down the road. So let's say that you're going to maybe target the youth market, that you people who are young people who are in high school who are intending to pursue flying as a career, and they want to get their certificates when they're in high school. You know, that would be one way that you could one target customer that you could define. Maybe it's somebody who has people who have successful businesses and they want to fly high-powered type of aircraft, and what their major limiting factor is the amount of time that they can devote to training. So you're going to have some more intensive type of program. And so if you can answer that question, say like that's what you are going to do, you then, so for this higher end market, that's going to answer the equipment questions that you have, like new type of latest aircraft, or you're going to have, you know, a 1975 Skyhawks or something like that with round dials. And so to be if you know who your target customer is, then it makes it a lot easier to answer like that question with equipment, the location, what your facilities look like, what your marketing look like, what your logo, everything. So I can't overemphasize enough the importance of deciding who that target customer is. And I know there's a temptation to say, well, you know, come here and learn to fly, and we're gonna be open to everybody. And you know, that's a good idea. And you know, if people show up at your door, you may not turn them away. However, the more that you can like define who it is that you're looking for, then you're going to be able to sharpen that appeal, and you're going to be able to set yourself apart among your competition. And that's really what it comes down to.
I think I'll chime in here real quick, Keith,
yeah.
because you really hit a good point. When you're setting up a business like that, it's so easy to get so widespread and think that you can help every single person. And us being humans, we really want to help every single person become pilots. It's part of our addiction of this thing that we do, flying. But to be specific in the business point of view, and that goes for any business, not just flight training, you have to know your market, and you have to target that market, just like you said, and be specific and stick to those targets. And that will make your business that much stronger.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, it's something that they learned in the tech industry a long time ago. There's this classic book called Crossing the Chasm, and it explains how most all successful business start very tightly defined, so that because really nobody who's starting a business has enough money to market to everybody. And that's one of the most, and we'll get to marketing later, but you have to serve your customers so well that they're going to go out and tell other people. And that's where, you know, the word of mouth comes from. It's just like you said, being able to define that is going to make you a more successful business. And you probably learned too, one of the hardest things that you have to learn as a new business person is when to turn customers away. And like, so somebody will come to you and say, I want you to do this. And just understanding that, well, no, I'm not really set up to do that. And like, so one of the conflicts you might have in flight training is if you have like I'll say all your customers are casual local customers who come in and fly a couple of times a week, and they have pretty flexible schedules, etc. But then you decide that you want to do accelerated training. So you're going to bring in somebody and they're going to fly 2 or 3 times a day. And but believe it or not, it's very difficult to mix those two type of customers together, because what you'll do is you'll end up, if you have a lot of accelerated students, that's going to lock out your local students, and you're probably going to end up with 2 unhappy groups. And so that's why knowing like what it takes to serve these different types of customers is a really important thing to consider and learn. And
right.
so
and part of the point on that, Keith, is, you know, you mentioned knowing your local market. So one of the things that any business, any good business can do, and I do that in my day-to-day business, is If you are not able to service that customer, give them a credible reference to go to get service. Because if at some point later down the line, they know somebody that might fit the business profile that you're looking for, they're more likely to recommend them come to you for that training. So definitely know your area, know who's doing training in technically advanced aircraft and light sport and jets. And so when you do have people call you up, send them to a place. Just don't say that we don't do it, but have a good route for that person to get the training they need, a good recommendation.
That's a great point, Rick. And so, as far as differentiation, what type of services do you provide? I mean, of course, you're doing flight training, but are you going to offer ground schools and other types of things that you can add to it? Like if maybe some schools now are offering videos of the flights as you do it, and so knowing your customer will tell you what type of services will work best for that particular market. So you've decided then that there is a local market, and you're going to take the plunge. What are some of the basic things that you're going to have to do as a business? So, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an accountant. I'm not going to give you that detailed sort of information, but just sort of an overview of the steps you need to take. You're going to have to form an entity of some sort. And so there's basically 3 different options there. You can be a sole proprietor. You can start an LLC, which is a limited liability corporation, or you can. Now, one I would probably recommend against is being a sole proprietor, because one of the reasons that you set up a separate entity is for and those sort of things, which are all good ideas, but also it's a lot easier to if you set up the business not as just yourself, as Keith's Flight School, and my taxes and my finances from my business and my personal side are all mixed together. That's not a good way to go about it. If you set up an LLC and you have a separate bank account for that LLC, and you do the accounting just like you do for any other business, that is a much better approach, rather than being a sole proprietor operating your name. As far as the difference between LLC and corporation, either one of them is easy to set up. It's really just about what type of tax implications that you're going to have. If you have an LLC, basically the money flows right through to your personal income tax. Whereas if you have a corporation, you're going to have a separate set of taxes, and you're going to have to pay yourself. But once again, if you have concerns about that, there's a lot of references that you can find online and books, and you can talk to an accountant or a lawyer based on an informational basis. I'm not a big advocate if you're starting a business and you don't have a lot of capital. Most of us don't when we're starting new businesses, to spend a lot of money on high dollar accountants and lawyers. You really don't need it at the initial stages. Like for filing an LLC, for example, the most recent state I did that in was Virginia, and it costs $50. It's a one sheet form that you can fill out online. It's a real easy thing to do. But just so long as you understand what the implications are going to be down the road, you don't have to spend a lot of money actually going through the process. The next thing you'll want is called an EIN. It's an employer identification number. It's essentially, think of it as a social security number for a business, and it has become that the IRS gives you. So you dial that phone number, you answer a few questions, and they can give you what your EIN number is right there on the phone. So that is a really easy process, and you're going to need that in things that you'll want to do. And then a lot of places you'll have to have a business license. This is all based on local law and what it is in your local situation, whether it's your county or city. Most likely be in an office or somebody at City Hall or your local government that can tell you or walk you through that process of getting a business license. And usually that's not all that difficult. Then one of the next things that we all love to consider is insurance. That will be probably recommended and a good idea. And there's a number of specialty brokers out there exactly what type of insurance you'll need for that sort of business. Here at AOPA, we are insurance brokers as well, so you can call us or somebody local, and just also you'll have insurance on your assets such as your aircraft, and so that is something that you will have to consider. And then something that torpedoes a lot of businesses, not just flight schools or aviation type businesses, is the decision whether you're going to pay you're going to have employees or contractors. And the difference is essentially if somebody is an employee, you're going to be paying their payroll taxes for them, Social Security and what have you. Whereas, and that seems like a pain. And you know, it is a pain, although now you can use QuickBooks. They have certain versions of the QuickBooks where you can do that fairly easily. And you'll be tempted to say, well, these flight instructors that, you know, you say you're going to be bringing on maybe a flight instructor or a desk person or mechanics or whoever it is you're thinking about hiring, that you want to bring those on as contractors so that you just give them a 1099 and you're paying them a certain amount of money, and then they're responsible for their own taxes. In most situations, though, and there's a whole, like I think maybe a 9-point process that the IRS looks through to determine if somebody is actually a contractor, if they're an employee. And I'll just from experience, I'll run their businesses, the flight instructors should be employees. Now, the problem with that, if you decide that they're going to be contractors because it's easier for you to do that, some months or years down the road, if the IRS makes a counter determination, you could be on the hook for those taxes that you should have been paying all along. So that's something you really want to think closely about, you know, look into it and get professional advice if you have any real questions. But I think for the most part, even though it's harder, you should be considering your flight instructors to be employees. So you've gone through all those steps and you set up your business. What are your sources of income going to be? And so flight training is difficult for a couple different reasons. One is that you're selling services. And so services mean that somebody's paying someone else for their time. And not only, and so the problem with that is a day for any given person. And so you're going to bump up against that sooner than what you are in the same situation. If you really talk to lawyers much, what they'll complain about is that they've maxed out their number of, no way to expand that. And so that's one of the things that you're going to run it up against. Now, the making it even more difficult is that a lot of service-related businesses, you don't have a lot of capital cost. So you can just hang out a shingle and offer a service to somebody, and you know there's not a lot of cost to you to set that up. Unfortunately, we need airplanes. And so you're going to have fairly high capital costs as well. And so that's one of the things that make, we're going to say, interesting, because you're limited by the amount of income, by the capital costs with facilities and aircraft, etc. So what is it that you can charge for? Of course, flight instruction. So you have your flight instructors and you're charging however much per hour, and then however, that's what you can get money for. Still talking about flight instructors, there's also ground instruction. And so here's where I want to encourage you. When I got types of ways that people are charging a difference between flight instruction and ground instruction. First of all, I advocate that it be the same charge whether an instructor is flying in the air or on the ground, because you're paying for their expertise whether or not the engine's turning. Now, what I also encourage over and over again is that just like a lawyer charges, an accountant, or your plumber, anybody, you start charging from the first interaction, from the first handshake to the goodbye. And so that you're not in this position of saying, on the Hobbs, and I spent another hour with him, but I was only talking about aviation related things, maybe 20 minutes or something like that. Well, that's not the way it should work, because it's the entire time that your instructor or you are engaged in helping the charge for. And so when I got to the flight school, we had this, we were doing that, charging for ground time, instructional time, I think they called it, and then flight time, where and so how much you're going to be charging for. Whereas if somebody's scheduled for a 2-hour block, and they show up, and as long as the instructor is engaged that whole time, you should charge for a 2 falls out, because that's the time that was devoted to helping that student, and that can make a big difference. And four flights a day, and so you're going to have 3 gaps between each of those flights. If you only take 10 minutes out of between minutes a day that you're not charging, and so if your rate is $50 an hour, that's $25 that you lose right there every day. So every 2 weeks, that's $500, $1,000. Am I doing the math right? Just from that 10 minutes between each flight. So it really adds up, and you really need to think about these little increments of time. So deliver a great service. The whole time that an instructor is engaged with the student, be giving away your time, because it's really the only thing that you have to sell. And so we've gone through the time there, right? And so the next is about be sure to be able to charge for everything. And another point too, one of the flight training is that they get out of the habit of it. First of all, we all know, being flight instructors, that probably a couple times a week, at least schedule for a couple times a week, because we all know that there are weather and other things that happen that are going to prevent you from flying. And so when you have those times when weather comes up, I come in today. Well, yes, because we're always behind in our ground instruction, what we need to be telling people. You should have a simulator, even if it's just a PC simulator. Even the old Microsoft. There's a couple of books out there that go through lessons that you can have with these PC-based simulators. If you can afford something more complex, or more sophisticated, that would be great too, because you need to keep people in the habit. But just the habit of continuing to learn and continuing to progress for their certificates. It'll make a really big difference about your student numbers that you'll really be interested in as you get going in your business. So you got your business. We figured out how we're going to make money here, and we've got our. Are we going to let people know about ourselves? And I think marketing overall is one of the biggest ways that young businesses run themselves into trouble. And maybe not so much these days because of advertising. And advertising used to be like more magazine and print and newspapers and radio and TV. A lot of those opportunities still exist, but I think more and more people are realizing that the internet is where people find practically everything, and it's probably where you're going to concentrate your efforts. And so up a new flight school and a flight training business is you're going to need a website, and focus on that. And it doesn't have to be, there's plenty of, make it really easy to create using templates, a good basic website. And that's really what you want to concentrate on. Just clean, delivers information. Don't worry about it being super sophisticated. Just get something out there that represents your business in a professional looking manner, and using a template that's there. Or if you are going to pay somebody to do it, you don't have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to have a decent website. There's plenty of young, say, college people or kids or, retired people. All sorts of people will help you put up a website for not all that much money. So first of all, don't be letting your capital dissipate into too much of a website. Once you have your website, the things you're going to be interested in are the listings. Google predominates so much now; it's a lot easier than it used to be. But there are some, places that you'll want to get out and get yourself listed online, and maybe your local newspaper has a site, that you can get listed there. And there's places like Social Flight, which is aviation specific, and a few others like that, and you want to be sure that you're showing up. Nowadays, Google's pretty good at finding your website, whether you're going to do much to promote it or not. What you can really do to help drive traffic to it and to help your business overall, especially in the beginning, is have events. And so different things like we would have a Learn to Fly night once every couple months, and we would promote that in the free listings in the newspaper. It'd be on Social Fly, and of course in your facilities, etc. And so that you give people a reason to come out, and you pull your airplanes out, and you have some people around, your students, for example, that you already have, to talk to the newcomers and get people involved that way. Now, what you'll find is that almost if you're into sales and marketing, the general metric that somebody uses is it takes 5 to 7 contacts before you make a sale. And we find that's true with flight training as well. People get curious and they want to dip their toe into it, and they might show up at the airport and just look around. They might call and ask some questions. When any of these get their information, get their email address, a number that you can text to, etc. Contacted you, you can put it out there. Hey, we're having a Learn to Fly night, and on such and such a night, and everybody's welcome. And so you will be surprised at the number of people who show up to that you've kind of seen before. Somebody that hasn't actually taken the jump yet into it, and that's an event like that can be just what you need to be able to close the sale. Other events, maybe of course, the pancake breakfast is widely done, maybe overdone. Most airports have that by now, but you might do a hot dog lunch, or some sort of variation. Just any type of excuse to bring, of course, the new people in, and as well as keeping your current customers satisfied. Because a lot of people who want to learn to fly, it's not just so much of, even the ones among us who have several thousand hours in our logbook, that's only several thousand hours out of a lifetime. And so most of the time that you spend involved with aviation is not actually in an airplane. People come to aviation because they want to be part of a community, because they like the lifestyle, they like the people there, and you need to be providing venues to fill that need. And so, especially when you're getting started, it's a great way to build some momentum for your business and make people understand who you are, to get some word of mouth going, that sort of thing. So events is a great way of marketing for a startup aviation business. And then the ongoing, here is the community, which I mentioned, as well as the repeat business, because somebody gets their first certificate, whether it's say they get a private pilot, of course, a year or two later, it's going to be time for them to get an instrument rating. And as long as you keep them involved and doing things, and be sure that you offer interesting flight reviews, because everybody's going to need a flight review, every couple of years. And so those are the type things that you want to have, so that you get that get your repeat business. And what you'll find over time is that if you satisfy your customers, if they enjoy the experience, they're going to bring their friends. And so there's no better marketing than like that.
Yeah, Keith, there's a couple things that I always tell people when you're marketing, especially with the community, that a lot of people forget about. Your local public library. A lot of public libraries welcome people that want to hold a seminar on, hey, you're interested in flying, or basic aerodynamics of flight, or something like that. And that really gets a lot of people. I got a lot of people that were rusty pilots before AOPA had the rusty pilot program, which I'm going to plug next. That's the other thing. Contact AOPA. Who's running rusty pilots now, Keith?
Donnie McKay is the person most of us will talk to. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. Rusty Pilots is a fantastic program for flight schools. It will get the pilots in your area that haven't flown in a while into your location. So definitely contact AOPA, not just because AOPA is here. If AOPA wasn't doing the presentation, I would say the exact same thing, but it's a very good tool for that. The last thing is every person running a flight school should become an FAA safety team representative. And the reason I say that is because not only would you be able to put programs on, but you will get networking through those programs. It's not hard to do. Contact your local FAST team program manager or local FSDO. They'll put you in touch with the right person.
That is great advice, Rick. In fact, I did both of those things. We ran Rusty Pilot seminars, and of course, that's before I was associated with AOPA, and we always got that thing. That is fabulous because what it does is it gives you, FAA does your marketing for you. They send out the marketing thing, and we filled up our, I think our room would hold about 50. We'd fill it up regularly just by the FAA safety. Great. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, so let's say now that you're satisfied that you're going to be able to bring your customers in, then you're going to have to turn to operations because you're going to need an airplane. And so you're going to have to decide, are you going to lease it or are you going to buy it? It used to be a lot easier to find people who are willing to buy an airplane for you that you would lease from them. It has become more difficult. I mean, it still happens, but it's just pretty generally, it's kind of difficult now. You're going to have to beat the bushes to find one that's going to work for you, with what you would be able or willing to pay, because flight training has taken off, and there's a lot of demand for those aircraft, which lease or buy. Of course, if you lease it, there's less capital outlay, and so you're preserving your capital, and that's a big plus with that. On the other hand, you don't control the asset. I mean, I think that you should actually buy your first aircraft so that you have that as like that particular aircraft. We mentioned before what type of aircraft that you want to get. Let's say if you're going for a higher end market or something newer, you want something like a DA-40 or something like that. If once again, to be able to answer these questions a whole lot easier. A lot of businesses now are going to the light sports because it's easier to get $500,000 you might be paying for a new Skyhawk or something like that. And so if you're not familiar with the light sport aircraft, there's a huge range of them, and we use those for training. You can use those for training not only for a light sport certificate, to get in a light sport aircraft as well. So that's a less expensive, more versatile way that that some people are going to. But really, another thing you want to consider is you want to match to your target market. But let's say that you differentiate yourself and you're going to you're out in rural Montana or something like that, and you're going to offer backcountry flying and tail wheel checkouts. Well, obviously you're not going to be buying a Cessna 172 if that's the type of flying that you're going to be concentrated on. So understanding what it is your business is going to help you answer those aircraft questions, which can become kind of sticky because it's really good to have as many aircraft as possible of the same type, because that really makes your schedule different types of aircraft and can't be used for one thing or another. And then as far as operations, we're going to have customers, like we said. So what are your customer expectations? And so the way you set up your business, customers now, a lot of them expect that you'll be able to have your schedule online. All right, and so you might be able to get away with that with certain types of businesses, but you're going to have to do to meet those expectations. And so then, for example, do you want somebody on the desk full time? You know, that's a pretty big cost for somebody just getting started. But you know, if you have certain types of customers, that's what they're going to be looking for. So you need to think about that when you're setting up your operations. What are my customers going to want, and what are the steps I'm going to take to be able to fulfill those expectations? Well, you're going to have airplanes, and they're going to need inspections. They're going to need annuals. They're going to have under 100 hours and all the things that break regularly on airplanes. How are you going to get that taken care of? It's a big expense to start out saying that you're going to do your own maintenance. What the ideal situation would be if you have a shop on the field who you can develop a good relationship with, and you know, discount maybe on the rates, but even more important than that, you want to be able to have some level of priority, because line for getting things done for your aircraft, and you know, it's time to go for a flight and you have something simple happen, like maybe a door latch breaks or something like that. If you have a good relationship with somebody able to do your maintenance, whereas if you are in this situation where you don't know when your annuals or 100 hours are going to be happening, you know, you could easily lose a week out of the availability of that aircraft just because you don't have a good maintenance situation. Now, eventually, even if you're dealing with a shop or FBO or something like that, if as your flight school grows, then you can do the calculations about whether you want to hire an A&P or somebody who's able to do more of your maintenance in-house. But going to take. So you're looking for a good relationship with a good shop that you can work with. Then you're going to need software to manage your business. You know, I've already mentioned software programs out there that you can use, but you do want to have it online, and you'll have to decide yourself where your customers are going to be able to schedule themselves. You're going to need some sort of software to manage that, and the more sophisticated ones will also help you manage your maintenance. So, like, you know, when you're coming up on 100 hours and things like that. Then you'll need accounting software. Probably 80% of the flight schools out there are using QuickBooks to go a different direction.
And really quick, you know, a lot of the scheduling programs, 50 bucks a month, most of them. QuickBooks Online, 30 to 40 bucks a month with integrated payment processing and everything. So, I mean, we're not talking big dollars here. We're talking very reasonable for these modern conveniences.
Absolutely, and you know, it's not the place to be trying to save and scrimp. You know, trying to there's some flight schools out there that are trying to business, and the amount of time and effort that you would spend trying to do workarounds on that. You know, you could be using QuickBooks. That's right, spend that little bit of money on those types of services. Okay, so the next section I've labeled here, NOTAMs, it's things to look out for. And so one of the things that get businesses in trouble is taxes. Now, the tax Now, most of the time you're selling services, and so most states, most jurisdictions, a lot of them, services aren't subject to sales tax. But that's not true across the board. So you're going to have to find out from your state and from your locality what type of taxes that they're going to collect on the type of business that you have, and make sure that you collect those taxes. Because if you go a year or two without collecting sales tax when you needed to, that can be tens of thousands of dollars hit just like that. And not too many businesses can survive that sort of unplanned expense. So understand what type of taxes that you have to pay. Another thing that gets you in trouble and that you wouldn't expect because you think it would be a good thing is how you collect your money. And so there's been some pretty high profile cases in the last couple of years. Pay up front for your private or, you know, whatever amount of flight training, and somebody pays you, you know, $10,000 to $50,000, and the business puts as they do the training, draw off of that account. And that seems like it would be a great idea because you get $10,000, $50,000 in your bank account. But what happens when for some reason that person has to leave, and they're gonna withdraw that money unless you've been really diligent about understanding how much money you actually have, because that money is not yours until they actually do the transaction. And so if that money would disappear, it could put you into a bad situation. So I would advocate that it's basically cash on the barrelhead type of thing. I mean, not necessarily cash, but credit card, what have you. But have the students pay as they go, and not accept a lot of money on account. I mean, some flight schools offer maybe a 10% discount for $1,000 at a time or something like that, and that's kind of okay if you can manage it. But overall, I would suggest that people just bring in your revenues as you make them, and it's not going to get you in a hole that you can't get out of. The other thing that we all love is compliance. What you'll be surprised to hear is that as far as the FAA goes, it's not so difficult as you might imagine. I mean, you're almost certainly not starting a 141 school, and so the FAA is not really interested in you as long as you're doing the regular inspections that you'll have on your aircraft. If you start a 141 school, you'll find out that that's a very different situation. It will surprise most people is the TSA and the amount of. So, from student starts, the number of records that you have to collect from people to prove that they're a citizen, to if you're going to run foreign students, which is a whole nother level of information that you have to collect, to the security training that you have to give to your flight instructors and everybody else who is in contact with the public. If you haven't been, say you've been giving your security training, but you haven't been documenting it in just the way they want to do, and let me say that the TSA is not uniform all the way across the country and the way that they look at these regulations. So you need to find out up front exactly what you need to be doing as far as the information that you collect for students and what you have to retain, and the training documentation that you give, so that you don't get yourself into a situation where you could be subject to fines of thousands of dollars. So that's a really quick overview of what's necessary. And so questions from you, Rick, or open it up. That's what I have.
Yeah, no problem,
yeah.
Keith. We have a few. So let's start. The first one that I think is the most relevant here is how do you deal with a CFI that takes advantage and charges? Bob asked this. Takes advantage and charges for non-instruction time. And the thing that I would have to ask first is, from which person are we talking about? Are we talking about me as the business owner? I have a CFI that may be taking advantage. That's a pure operations dealing. That needs to be addressed in obviously a business sense, and to bring that to the attention of the instructor to listen. When you're scheduled from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., you're instructing. You're not goofing around. You're not talking to other instructors. You're supposed to be with that client. Now, on the other side, the student point of view, which we may have some students online, I would bring that up with your instructor first. And if you don't feel comfortable with that, bring that up to the chief flight instructor. And hopefully that you would be able to address this. Now, I know the LLC thing. And one thing that I want to add to what Keith said is LLCs are great, especially for small businesses. You can treat LLCs as a corporation. So you can tax, which is usually about a 15% rate after the first 50,000 or something, or up to the first 50,000. So you can be taxed like a corporate. Accounting stuff like that, talk to the business professionals. You can find good resources online to talk to about those things. Talk to your accounting friends about it. Really want to know where to go. Another thing that we should bring up, and Keith, you mentioned the tax thing, where you could get into trouble with taxes. I found that a lot of people actually allocate those funds because they're only paid quarterly a lot of times. You know, a lot of us aren't big, or even annually now. If you hit a certain dollar amount, if you're below a certain dollar amount, you're only limited for payroll taxes towards the end of the year, and all of a sudden you're calculating your payroll taxes. Wow, holy cow, we got, you know, $10,000 in taxes we have to come up with. So definitely accounting is pretty important. Let's see here. We had one other one. Jeff, who's a lifetime member of ours, Keith, said lawyers use a retainer to charge clients. Okay, so, you know, money up front, basically. Some professional services use a subscription model for charging clients. Has anyone seen these types of models used successfully in flight training? Obviously, we just talked about that money on account thing. One of the things that you need to remember, and this really gets down to how you set up your business, whether you're a cash-based accounting or an accrual accounting, right? So cash-based accounting, you're realizing that money comes in, money goes out. However, when you have something like money on account, you really need to be doing, if you're doing that, you should be using an accrual basis for your accounting system, because that is deferred revenue, okay? That is unrealized revenue. That is a liability on your books, okay? Because like you mentioned, Keith, those services haven't been rendered yet. So you don't want to be spending that cash and realize that as net profit. That needs to go into a liability account. As far as a subscription-based model, I haven't personally heard of anything like that. Have you, Keith?
No, I haven't. No, and I would think that the issue would be that you know, the cost for running an aircraft are so high, and you know, what would be the utilization of some sort of subscription like that? I mean, I'm not saying that it can't be done. There are some be a $50 or $100 a month membership rate, and that will get you some amount of discount or other type. But that's fairly popular, which I guess somewhat close to a subscription. And that's, in my mind, that's something worth investigating if you can come up with the services to deliver off of that subscription charge.
Okay. There was another question that somebody pointed out about the independent, which, like you said, the IRS is getting really, really particular about what they consider an independent contractor. And there's, you know, those the 9th step or whatever to do that. The easiest thing, the most basic thing is, if you're the one setting the person's hours, if you're providing a uniform for them, if you provide them business cards, they are an employee. Okay. If, for example, I know an independent instructor from across the airfield that specializes in technically advanced aircraft, or as a BPPP instructor, I might go to him and up to a Bonanza or something. You can then say, hey, would you be interested in training this client? We would run it through our business. I would pay you as a private contractor. That is really what it's for. Okay, that is what independent contracting is for, is to utilize, you know, really shouldn't be your employees, but that it opens up your business to other avenues of revenue.
Right. Yeah, agreed.
Let's see what we had. I think we had one more. Parts. This is a loaded question, Keith. Part 61 versus part 141. This always comes up in like every presentation we do. Any points on that?
Well, you know, school is in danger of starting a 141 school because it's probably a couple-year process in most FSDO areas. So a 141 working with VA students, that's a good reason to have a 141 school. If you're going to be having people come in from overseas, often that requires a 141 school and a few college type of programs. And you have a really solid business reason for going into 141, because it's a world of hurt that you're not subject to as a Part 61 school.
Yeah, no, fortunately now there are structured 141 programs that you can use. It's not like you're coming up with it all on your own these days, but some of the major flight training brands do have that, or could get their curriculum certified under 141. And ultimately, I direct you, if you're interested in 141, contact your local FSDO.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, and this is another good point that came up. So on that charging of the hours, and I'm wholeheartedly agree with you that if you are booked for a 2-hour block, you should be paid for that 2-hour block. Any other industry, that's the standard. Okay, so if you set that precedent, then there won't be a question about it. So if you have 2 hours and you're charging $50 an hour, and you're going to be getting that 100 or 110, and at the that they're going to be charged that. Don't try to decrease your value by because not only are you cheating the business, but you're cheating the instructor as well. So let's all try to make flight instruction a viable business and charge accordingly.
Oh, absolutely. Every once in a while that we should be upping our rates. I think to pay someone with a flight instructor's expertise. If you're not making as much as your plumber or your electrician, or heck, my kid's fencing instructor, then you need to deliver a great service, and then don't be shy about charging about it. And I find that nobody ever complained about our rates, and once we made our the process known, the expectations of how you would be charged, nobody ever complained about that either, for charging for the whole 2-hour block, like you said.
Right, absolutely. A thing that always came to mind was piano lessons, anything like that. I mean, it is up there, and the expectation is set. You're paying for a block of time, and that's that. Now, obviously, the airplane's going to be variable with time. That's your variable time, not flight instruction,
right?
Or ground instruction. At the same time, you don't want your instructor, and I don't want to see any instructors do this. And I know we all have. I know, Keith, you have too. Is they get the binder and they give it to the student and say, "Okay, go pre-flight. I'll be out in 10 minutes." Don't do that. Your client is paying for your time, and you need to be with that client the entire time. Okay,
Yeah.
Can't stress that enough.
Oh, right. I agree. Walk out there with them and, talk about new things. There's always something to talk about.
So. Absolutely. Have you read this article? Keep in their face. And that's part of the engagement too that you touched on, Keith, is keeping these people engaged in the flight training. The more you are engaged and the more you make a connection with relation out there that agrees with that. I still keep in touch with my instructors, from when I was training. It's good. These people become friends after
Absolutely.
a while. So.
Yep.
Well, we don't have any other questions. So just to plug a couple things, guys. AOPA is such a fantastic partner with NAFI and fantastic sponsor. Please support them. I'm a member myself. Take advantages of all the services they have. The legal services, the medical, these are all tools that the organization can provide to you. And obviously from the So I thank Keith, I thank AOPA, and everyone else that joined us tonight. Please remember to go onto the website, .org website, view that. If you're not a member, we would love to have you. There's a lot of new programs coming up. So please, please, please stay tuned. And We will be giving Wings proficiency credit for this program. For those of you, please take the course evaluation. Again, that helps us create these programs. If you have any suggestions or even want to host one of these things, please reach out to us, complete the course. I'm Rick Todd, NAFI Board President. Thank you for watching the September edition of Mentor Live. Fly safe.